Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Welcome to Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, where we focus on the hottest HR tech news everyone needs to know to be in the know. We break down the news of the week and help you make sense of what it means for our industry and how it can impact your specific organization. We're here recording today on March 6th. Boy, is it really March already? March 6th, 2024, bringing you all the news you can use. And I'm your host, Stacey Harris, Chief Research Officer and Managing Partner for Sapient Insights Group, a research and advisory firm. And joining me today is Cliff Stevenson, my Director of Research and Principal Analyst for Sapient Insights Group. Cliff, how did we get to March already? It's here. Isn't that like March Hatter tea or something like that? I don't know, but it's ridiculous.
Almost, when this comes out, it'll be around the Ides of March. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, but I thought we were just trying to remember if it was 2023 or 2024, and now we're almost through the first quarter.
Yeah, took me a moment, the little pause before I said the date, because I'm like, oh, got to make sure it's 2024, right?
Right.
We've got a lot going on coming up here at this conversation. Yeah. We're going to try and keep a 30-minute window, but I don't know. We got like 7 conversations going this week. It's been a really hot week for HR tech and HR technology news, right?
Yeah, and it's all different kinds. I think we mentioned in the last episode that there was a lot of AI, whereas there wasn't one in the episode before. But here it's all different kinds. We're going to be talking about different companies, what they're doing in terms of their personnel. Specifically, we're going to be talking about isolved and Culture Amp, and we're also going to be talking about acquisitions, another topic that we bring up here quite a bit with Workday, with Deal, and their expansion. We'll talk about employment law. New York's got some new laws around social media, which is topical right now because as of this moment that we're recording, LinkedIn is down. I don't know if Facebook's up or down. You'll have to tell me.
Facebook's back up. I was on it earlier, but it was down yesterday. So it is the battle of the social medias for keeping their applications up this week, right?
Yeah, that's right. And we're going to be talking, because today is National Women's Day. It's time of the recording. We want to talk a little bit about some stories that have come out recently about women in leadership. Honestly, every day is National Women's Day for me, as it should be for all of you. And then we're going to take some time to talk about some broader topics we've seen. One from Forbes about whether the era of all-in-one talent solutions is coming to an end. Spoiler alert, it isn't. And then a really fun post from friend of the show, Donald Taylor, talking about ChatGPT, and the whole concept of hallucinations that happen, which is their term in the industry for when just information seems to be made up. That'll be pretty fun. But let's get into the meat of it.
Before we dive in, we should probably tell people where we're going to be at in the next couple of weeks, just in case they want to catch up with us, right? Because I'm going to be on the road, and you're talking about going on the road a little bit. You're going to be at one event possibly in the coming months, right?
Yeah, exactly. At the end of April, the 24th, 23rd and 24th, probably traveling, will be at the Workforce Software event, which I believe is in Las Vegas. But you can look for Workforce Software. They call their event Vision, with all caps for reasons I'll never understand. And I love how all these conferences have such cool names. isolved is Connect, and they do Vision. These are all, I really do like that. It makes it feel like more of an event, but that's where I'll be at the end of April. You've got a much more dance card though, right?
Yeah, I got a few. So in mid-April, I'll be at the Workday Innovation Session out in the Bay Area. And then the week after that, I will also be at the Oracle Application Summit in the Bay Area, in the Redwood area. So I'll be out there, and in between, I've made the choice because I try and keep that balance between home and life going well, to visit my kids who live out on the West Coast of, you can call it that. They live another 5 hours west and out in Hawaii. Get to see my granddaughter, hopefully. I'm also going to be on March 1st in San Antonio. I think I've been saying Austin, but I just got the update that it's San Antonio for the PlanSource Customer Advisory event. I'm actually really excited about that. We're going to be talking about some really cool stuff going on, both in the benefits space as well as where we're seeing the market go from an overall HR strategy perspective, and how things are changing and how things are adapting in the market that we're in. And then I think you've got a webinar coming up, right, for IRM, Cliff, that everyone should be aware of.
That's right. There's going to be one on the 20th. We're going to be reviewing the big key findings from your big keynote speech at HR Tech, the one that happened in October. So for anyone that missed that, I know there was a lot of people that didn't get a chance to see it. This will be sort of the chance to catch up. It's public, it's free. And I also found out that I will be doing another webinar. This one will be a little more specific. That'll be sort of the HR findings, trends overall. But I'll be doing one on the 21st. That'll be hosted by Cornerstone, but won't be specific to any of their products. And that is going to be open to the public now. And that'll be on the 21st, and that'll be on learning content strategy. So if that's something that is of interest to you, we'll be throwing out some statistics, data, and there'll be more of a panel discussion talking about how learning content can help drive your whole organizational strategy.
That's March 20th and March 21st. So we're going to be on opposite ends of the world, sort of having really interesting conversations. And then the week after that, we're going to kick off what is our 6-month immersive cohort education series with our very first event on building an adaptable HR system strategy that works. We're really excited. We've got our cohort now. We're down to the last sort of final edits and dry runs and all that stuff in the next couple of weeks. This is really exciting. It's a 6-month program based off of, for anybody who had attended the workshops that we delivered at the HR Tech conference. This is now the expanded version of those with a lot more detail on how you actually get that done, a lot of leadership development and a lot of hands-on exercises that actually to get the HR system strategy built within your organization. So it's a packed couple of weeks. No wonder I'm tired right now, Cliff. I'm feeling kind of exhausted. And on top of all this, I know people have asked us to go to a couple events. We literally haven't had the time because we've had too much client work, but I know Transform is a big event going on, I think next week. I know Stacey Harris is going to be out there. So if anybody's out there, I would say go see her sessions. We know the Unleash event is going to be held in the US. That's, I think, May 8th, 9th time frame as well. We have a lot
That'll be in Vegas as well.
Yep, that. And then the Epic event being put together by the HR Executive magazine that Mark Stelzner is running this year, which is sort of really talking about what's happening and transforming the whole benefits, wellness, and HR space. And a lot of practitioners are going to be at that. So everybody's going to be all over the place. It's definitely spring, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I should mention, speaking of being all over the place and coast to coast, I just got notice in that actually the Vision event will be in Miami. But okay. Speaking of going coast to coast, that does bring us into other people we've seen doing a lot of movement. isolved specifically made a couple of big announcements in terms of personnel that are joining their group, including Howard Tarnoff joining the Strategic Customer Success team, and friend of the show, Opal Waniak, who will be joining as well as the SVP of Market and Product Strategy. So Opal was a analyst relations person back when it was Ultimate Software. And both Stacey and I worked with her. She was wonderful to work with. And as it became UKG, she started to move up and get really into that whole market intelligence world of understanding the sort of global market for HCM products. And now this is sort of the next step in her career. So very cool.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. I mean, I know isolved's a big company. They have about 150,000 clients when you take into account their PEO clients and their very small companies. And then there's mid-range companies. And they've done very well from a user experience and vendor satisfaction perspective in our research. A lot of people didn't know. They kind of came out of nowhere, a lot of people said, but really what it was is that a lot of times their brand was underneath either a broker or another firm or someone else offering it. But probably about 5 years ago now, they started to really push, hey, it is an isolved solution that you're using, and then started to really push around a lot of services around that package. We've had a really good relationship with isolved. Amber Lair, who runs our analyst relations program over there, is probably has the best attitude I've seen in this market and really has, I think, one of the greatest understandings of how to take a brand that was really unknown to something that was absolutely well known in the market over just the last 3 years. So the fact that they're investing in two really critical positions, particularly Howard Tarnoff, and many people may not know his name, but he ran what was one of probably the best customer service programs I'd ever seen over at Ceridian some the XOXO program, you might know it as, but it really kept Ceridian customers who were on the older platform sort of in comfort is probably not the right word, but kept them in a place where they felt like, yes, they're going to stick with the organization while it's moving over to a cloud platform, which is now Dayforce. And Howard, spearheaded a lot of that. On the other hand, like you said, Opal has been a long time a friend of both the research that we've done. She was one of the first people who came out and supported it back when I took it over from Lexi in 2014. And more important, I think, that Opal came from the product development side. She was one of the first analyst relations people that I ever met who really started talking about the product itself and how it was being utilized. So she wasn't just sort of organizing and filling space. There's only one other analyst relations person who I know who sort of has been that kind of connection to sort of the products and areas. And Opal really did kind of said, hey, I understand this business. I understand the product. I'm not surprised to see her moving into this SVP market and product strategy role. But I think this is big for iSolved. This to me, probably, we haven't had a conversation with anybody, so don't take this for fact at this point. But my bet is that with these two big roles, as well as some others I know they're recently hired, that they will probably be looking to move up market, which I think is something they haven't really tackled yet. But when you look at where the pay cores and the pay velocities and the pay comms and what's happening in ADP and the Workdays kind of moving downstream, Ceridians and UKGs, that market is really ripe for some opportunities, I think, for various organizations who are good at both service and solution. And I wouldn't doubt that we'll probably see them sort of moving up market eventually with some of these new hires that they've added. I don't know about you, Cliff. That's my perspective on it, probably.
One of the things that I think, too, that it shows just a very keen understanding of playing to their strengths, right? If you look at iSolved and where they show up in our research, right, in the voice of the customer, and we're talking to you, the audience, and asking what people like, that sort of name recognition, right, and understanding where they fit in the market, and that's Opal's role, but that customer service, they always rank very highly in that voice of the customer rankings. And so to say, okay, what can we do to not just rest on our laurels, but to keep developing our strengths and figure out a way to continue that growth in a organic way by picking not just big names, not like, oh, I know who that is, I've heard that, executives' names, but instead going with people that are extremely good at what they do. And I find that very cool and I think a good move.
Yeah. I do think we're starting to see some organizations either retrench and refigure out where they're standing or sort of rebranding to some extent. And in that category, I'd say that's where Culture Amp is at. We got an announcement from them that they have, which to them seemed like a really important component, that they had welcomed a global workplace thought leader, Esther Perel, as an advisor to the organization. We hadn't seen a lot from Culture Amp for a while. Many of the people that we had known at Culture Amp had left the organization. They had gone through a couple of rounds of funding and then sort of had gotten really quiet. The application always does really well. Another one that does well in the user experience of vendor stat rating, when we get enough responses, when we get enough people who are sharing their insights with us. But we also, at the same time that we heard about this advisor role, I also got some announcements from Julie Knight Levinson. Many people might know her. Again, another long-term marketing leader in the industry who's been at a lot of organizations around the market, who's now also taken on it looks like a key role within the organization. So I do think we're starting to see, as the market is shifting a little bit, we're seeing a lot of mergers and acquisitions, but we're also seeing a lot of sort of rethinking our brand and rethinking who needs to be in roles that are going to, like you said, play to our strengths in organizations, right?
Yeah. And I think particular story from Culture Amp, bringing on Esther Perel as an advisor, I think that really, again, like you said, plays the strengths. If you don't know her work, she's notable enough you could find her just through a Wikipedia search. But, I think having seen her as a speaker, this whole idea of the soft skills, really, there's so much talk about how there isn't that much separation between life and work, and everyone's sort of navigating a good way to sort of talk about this. But she really intentionally blurs the lines because she talks about relationships, meaning like a marriage or some other type of relationship that humans would have, and then also work. And she does it seamlessly between the two, right? And it's extremely important to remember. I think a lot of us learned that lesson, for better or for worse, during the pandemic years.
Yeah.
But that there isn't that much separation. I think, as you said, that really lets them flex what they do best, culture amp, by bringing her on as a trusted advisor to their group.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is a space we're going to see more in the next couple of months is we've talked a lot about engagement and a lot about culture and a lot about sort of the relationship you have with employees. Does that stand strong? Do we see that continued conversation even as the market continues to slow down slightly? Or is the tight labor market, which even though the market is slowing down a little bit, there's still a tight labor market, does that continue to drive this as a topic? And like you said, really push organizations to rethink what they're doing from just a compliance perspective to a more strategic HR function that is more thoughtful about their employee roles, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. We'll see how reactive we spend so much time. We're going to be proactive. We're not just going to adjust to whatever happened in the last 60 days. But I think this will put people to the test because it's easy to say that when everything's going very well, very easy. But when push comes to shove, hopefully we see that people stand by sort of the strides we made in employee rights and understanding the human side of the work equation. But you did mention tight labor market, but again, that is, as we've talked about before, sort of industry by industry. There's still obviously a lot of interest in hiring and hiring the right people, as seen by one of probably the biggest story that happened in this news period is that Workday announced their intent to acquire HiredScore. This was like the alarm bells. This made, for you listening, you probably have heard about this, but if not, I think this is a major news story. Stacey and I spent quite a bit of time sort of in the green room before the podcast talking about what does this mean with the capital M? It goes beyond, and I think you are actually the one that pointed this out, Stacey. This probably goes beyond just simply getting this company so that they could have this technology to expand their hiring platform. I think that they see some of what HiredScore has done in the past and the technology they have as being enough of a differentiator that could be used in other areas. Who knows? But again, this is speculation on our part.
Yeah. I was really intrigued when this came out. I think there was a lot of buzz on LinkedIn. It was funny. I got a text right after it came out after I'd sort of said, hey, big news, Workday is doing an acquisition. And one thing to know probably is Workday doesn't do a lot of acquisitions. They're very intentional about their acquisitions. They usually do small companies with limited amount of years and limited culture so that what they're hiring, oftentimes acquiring, is the technology and the people and the skill sets. Vinley was not the last one, but the last big HR one that they had acquired, which is their contingent workforce management solution. And it really, again, that whole idea of sort of complementing things for them is really important in the Workday environment. But right after this announcement came out and I put a little posting out, one of our colleagues emailed me and said, why is this getting so much attention? It's just one of many. And my take on it, again, this is purely my take, is that HiredScore is a talent acquisition sort of front end solution. It really focuses on sort of gathering data within the organization to understand your talent skills and fits and what you need, and helping you identify the right roles you need to fill within the organization. It is truly one of those solutions that I think was on the cutting edge of artificial intelligence in a way that it is sort of chat GPT Like when I first talked to Athena Harp, who is their CEO, and by the way, probably one of the most interesting female leaders I've ever had the chance to meet. Speaking of women in HR technology right now, she walked me through in a way that I've never had a founder walk me through. And this was in 2019, 2020, walked me through how critical it was to have the right data set to be pulling your analysis from around open positions within the organization. And she walked me through about how they were very succinctly focusing on internal data sets they were getting from inside companies, highly curated versus sort of scraping the internet, which we see in a lot of the other organizations who are what they would consider talent intelligence platforms. The other thing that they were very focused on is that matching component, making sure they were really thinking tightly about what fit within an organization and what capabilities various job seekers had or different roles they had. And she explained it in a way that I thought was not just sort of the standard, we match, but we match and we address biases by having a human component in that mixture. And I know that's kind of seems sort of antithesis to what we're hearing in the market right now, which is bias and artificial intelligence and the world is sort of rushing so fast ahead that having humans in the mix is a bit of a challenge. But she had worked out with her team the very places at which you needed to add sort of the human conversation, the human sort of component to that conversation. And that was as much, I think, of the secret sauce of what they had as all the other algorithms and tools that did all the matching and everything. It was, here's where I need to inject in here some thinking that goes beyond what we can just scrape from the data. And that I thought was fascinating, because that is a art in and of itself, to understand at what point does the technology get to its limit, and you have to add sort of the creativity of where we're at in the sort of human space. The other thing I think that's interesting about this is that one of the big mentions that came out of this acquisition is that both Carl Escoban, who's the new CEO over at Workday, as well as Athena, mentioned in their sort of quotes on this, how much they were focused on ethical use of artificial intelligence in solving challenges for the organization. And I can't emphasize enough that that sort of opening shot at being ethical in this space is critical. I mean, Cliff, you and I have covered how many stories now about the risk and the government compliance around this, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. My take on this too is that my experience with HiredScore, a takeaway was that they've always used certain adjectives around their AI, even in their early days, of openness, transparency, safety. Right now, I think they're using the word explainable AI to describe it, which I think is a great way to put it. And I think that goes into the ethical use. It goes beyond just sort of what is legally required, right? And where the laws are. So, yeah, and I'd love to see it. When speaking of hiring, another one, an employee record provider, Deal, that's with two E's, right? Not DEAL. If you didn't know them, they were, as I said, known for being an employee record and EOR. They are going into payroll. So we had mentioned, I think it was just the last episode, that HiBob had been on the other side and we're going into payroll. So this is something that seems to be of interest. This kind of continues the theme we've seen for quite some time now of companies that carve out a niche for themselves, usually kind of starting with payroll and expanding out. But this is sort of the opposite, right? They're EOR and going into payroll and HCM. So pretty interesting thing. They did this, a lot of it through acquisition, through PayGroup and PaySpace, because there's never enough companies to pay at the beginning of their name. They are now going in and offering payroll for all of their EOR providers, or kind of just making this across any of their clients that they provide EOR for, being able to do payroll for them. So just kind of interesting. That seems to be a sort of new trend that's going on. I do think it used to be more payroll and then go somewhere else, but I can see where, especially in the EOR space or sort of areas similar to that, where you are handling a lot of the organizational compliance and everything sort of but payroll, than to get in and do payroll.
Well, and I think this actually lends to some of the conversation we were having on LinkedIn around both the Workday acquisition and this, and then there was another big one, Sterling and Indeed, and there were some other acquisitions that were happening at the same time, is that I think what we're seeing in our data is there had been a lot of noise made that the Workday acquisition and as well as some of these other ones were as big as what we had seen back when Oracle had bought Taleo and SAP had bought SuccessFactors. And I really pushed back on that, because I think what we saw back then was the older platforms were slow to move to the cloud, and they were literally losing market share at pretty rapid spaces. And they had to acquire those solutions to basically just keep up with the market share. And that was a challenge for them, because they had newer organizations coming into the market at the enterprise level, like Workday, that were challenging them in their space. In this particular case, we are not seeing the HRMS solutions that are currently at the top of the pipeline in many cases from an enterprise perspective. Companies over 5,000 employees, 10,000 employees, that would be your SAP, your Workday, or your Oracle, as well as sort of the Infors and some of those organizations. And then down market, you're seeing Ceridian and UKG, right? We're not seeing organizations leave their enterprise HR platforms. What is interesting is we are seeing them in the data flip payroll systems, performance management systems, recruiting solutions. Not that they're all going to the big enterprise platforms, but they are willing to replace those at a little bit more rapid point. And payroll did not used to be a system that I think was on that space, right? But what people are starting, I think, to see at least in our data, is that core enterprise HR location for your employee data is the harder thing to replace these days. And so we're definitely seeing more organizations trying to figure out, how do I connect what I'm doing through those applications in a way that we didn't see in 2012 when organizations were going through this conversation, because the artificial intelligence conversations keep tying back to, where is my data? How clean is it? How connected is it? And then most organizations have done a lot of that connection work through the HRMS, or the platform that's got your profile, your employee, correct? And so I think that we're going to see a huge amount of continued sort of movement in the space, but it's going to be a little bit more around those platforms. The other thing I think that's going to happen is that we're going to see a lot more acquisitions over just the next 12 months to 24 months, because what we definitely saw was a slowdown in investments and a slowdown in funding. And so many of these point solutions that had gotten several rounds of investments, particularly in that talent intelligence space and some of the early learning spaces, in some of the sort of culture and performance management spaces, those organizations are at risk and looking for some homes now. So those were kind of my two takes on what we're seeing in this M&A space. But Cliff, that's a lot. It's a lot for a buyer to kind of keep in their head. You've gone through some of this. You've been an analyst like I have for many years. What's your recommendations for buyers on how they should be taking in this kind of news?
Yeah, for potential people buying potential software, like if they were going to go out and think about deal, like I think the important thing to understand is, has anything changed in terms of your own needs, right? I think sometimes these make a big splash to get your name out there. But as a software solution provider, and if you are actually one of the people thinking of purchasing that, you go, oh, they seem to be big. That seems to be big news. But there's no correlation between this sort of activity and long-term success. There's not a negative correlation either. I'm not saying it should be looked at negatively, but I would say just maybe don't fall into the sort of the hype bubble, right? You want to be thinking, all right, has this changed anything in terms of what I'm looking for? And even if they have now picked up a sort of technology or a function you were looking for, like, oh, that's good, that's something we were looking for, it may be some time before it's implemented. In this case, they were able to sort of turn that around very quickly. But sometimes, like when we talked about with Workday, there may be some time before that technology is used in different applications. So it may be worth remembering that it can take some time, especially if they're trying to do things in a thoughtful and ethical manner, or if they just needed to integrate with existing technology or with existing customer needs, which should be the primary focus. So yeah, I think these are big stories. It's very interesting. But if you're out there as a buyer, I think it's kind of just worth noting. I wouldn't change any deals in progress or even any RFPs, even if especially if it's the RFP process. I'd say don't let that disrupt your entire setup and system you have going. Be thoughtful, take your time as always. It's kind of good to know. And that's what we're here to do, kind of let you know a little more of the inside of what's happening. But I don't think it doesn't change the overall landscape just yet. It's more of a sign of things to come. It's not a canary in the coal mine. Or
And
a good version of that.
I agree. And I think the only other place maybe to think about is that it is an opportunity, if you are in the middle of negotiations, maybe to negotiate some more sort of service levels. We've seen organizations do that, to ask to be on different advisory boards so that you can be involved in some of that integration process. The only time I think it gets a little bit messy, but I think this is something that again, none of us can control the market, is if you've got a major partner who now has been bought and acquired by another partner. And that can sometimes cause some challenges. But I think, again, that's when you go back to the table and you have that open and honest conversation with the vendors and make sure what your timeline is for their investment in the continued support of the work that you're doing. And so it's worth a conversation. But like I think you said, it's not worth, let's rip everything apart and start brand new at this point, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's the case. Always know timelines, roadmaps, something always to be working, not just the current situation, but the future. That's exactly a great point. And one thing that you had mentioned earlier too, which was understanding how this will affect laws and being aware of certain changes to compliance issues. One that we saw this week actually was from New York. And I should mention that New York and California, especially if you're one of our international listeners, things that happen in New York and California tend to be like harbingers. They tend to sort of give you a taste of what the entire country, or at least what the federal is going to do, although well in advance. So not always. I mean, California still has those, they call it like little Europe, right? As far as how they structure their HR laws. But a new one from New York, which is social media law, it's A386 if you're into that sort of stuff. Basically, it's just saying that employers can't request usernames, passwords, or even like your handle, what you go by on social media platforms. This can be important, especially in fraught political times. The US, as most people know, is going through an election period. And some employees can feel like they're being asked, are you the person who wrote this political thing that maybe disagrees with your employer position? And they're saying you don't have to give up that information. I do want to point out, this is different than if you wrote something that is damaging to the company. We've seen stories in the past where someone wrote something that was maybe a slur or something like that. Well, then absolutely, then they have the ability to fire you. They can't ask for information if it isn't part of like a larger investigation.
Yeah, I think these are funny enough. We joked about it, but Facebook's down last couple of days, and today it looks like LinkedIn's down a bit. These sort of one of the questions we added this year in the survey is to relook at what social media technology is being used by organizations from the HR front. And I think every organization should be very careful about any social media scraping or assessment tools where and there's a lot of technology. I think we are at like 24%, 30% of organizations who are using some sort of tool like that in their background kind of check process that they're doing, right? And so just to always be careful about that, and that you're not gathering information or details that are going to end up in hot water, particularly that we always don't know what the laws, regulations are if we're in more than one state. Make sure you are getting really good counsel on that anywhere you go, right?
Yeah. And be aware also that even by the time this comes out, it may have already been decided, but there's social media major law in the Supreme Court of the United States as well being looked at on whether you can request to have stuff taken down or removed, or who has control over what is posted up there and what is taken down, and that sort of thing that really can matter a lot to companies as they're trying to control sensitive information or anything of that nature. But in a more, I guess that's not really negative or positive, just something to be aware of. But as I mentioned, it's International Women's Day today. I know that if you look on our LinkedIn, we did a post just showing some of our love, but we mentioned, interesting enough, this was not planned. Yeah. Well, theoretically, I know we mentioned Opal, we mentioned Esther Perel, all of these that was just happened to be in. But at the same time, we saw a very interesting article talking about some weird and interesting statistics about the difference between having women in senior leadership versus having women represented in leadership positions, maybe lower down the ladder or throughout. And in the Academy of Management Journal, right, so this is an academic journal, they found that more male-dominated firms, such as law and things like that, engineering, senior leadership tend to pay less attention to diversity efforts out the organization when there was more women in just the executive, right? And that led to worse gender diversity at lower levels, meaning what they saw was, oh, there's women here. What do you mean? We're fine, right? We've got 2 women here at the executive level. Therefore, the company's fine, right? That's sort of oversimplifying it, but the math checked out of saying, if you just focus, if we as a group and as a society just focus and saying, okay, there's more women in the Fortune 500 as CEOs than ever, like that does not mean that the problem is anywhere near solved. We need to think about women in leadership throughout the organization. And although that kind of makes sense, it's good to see it being tackled and handled in an objective manner by an academic journal.
Yeah, this one, I thought it hit me as something that we've got a lot on the books right now. Europe is just going to put in place its big pay equity laws, and or at least they're going on the sort of requirements about sort of recording them is starting to come around for organizations, although I think they've pushed back a couple times on that. But we're also seeing a lot of focus on sort of just the overall conversation about women and do I have to sort of fit into the mold to make it in the leadership role, Or do I bring what is unique about me as a woman in my space and make that part of the leadership environment, part of the culture, right? And I think there's also a lot of times you hear this commentary, and which is one of the things that was tackled by this research, which I really liked, that women at executive levels are often don't try and help the next level up. And I think they really found that is not the case. But what happens is there's not enough support in those organizations, oftentimes at the lower levels, to allow the next round of leadership to sort of move through the ranks in a way that would have happened previously. And so expecting that because I've got 2 or 3 women on my executive board, they should be pulling everyone up. They should be fighting for things. No, that's not how that works, right? Kind of the Facebook pictures on the wall thing. No, that just means you've done a good job here. You need to keep doing a good job elsewhere as a whole company, and everybody in the company needs to have that conversation. It's not on the shoulders of the 1 or 2 female executives you've got in the room, right?
That's exactly it.
So that's my 2 cents on that. I think I'll leave it there because it's obviously an area that is very passionate about, but it is frustrating to see it happen, right?
Yeah. And like I said, we shouldn't discount what we've done. It's just like you said, that's just a starting place. We can't, and it makes sense when you think about it, that why that would happen, right? We talked about the soft skills, human nature, human psychology. And you go, okay, look at this. We've done it. But it's like, no, that's, like I said, that's just starting. And especially, as you said, if there's women at the top pulling people up, if they're just replacing the women, like it's almost like that token diversity issue, right? We're just replacing these same women. You always have 2 or whatever the case might be. And that's not solving anything at all. And then finally, I love all these topics. This has all been great. And I know we're wrapping up towards the end, but this is one, and we've mentioned Donald Taylor before, shared some very interesting things that he's had. This is one, Stacey, you sent me. I got a good laugh out of it. And he was basically relaying a story that happened to him personally using ChatGPT. And he was looking at a global sentiment survey on L&D, and he was using GPT-4 specifically to categorize some answer to questions. And he was like, wow, it's really weird. It said it was impossible. And then it gave him text from a fictitious conference. And then it started talking about stories. And he said it felt like I was watching a friend gaze out the window in the night trying to express something painful. Like I was thinking it just sounded like going back to my college days, like a kid on the couch that had maybe smoked some of the illegal substances and was like just rambling about nothing. Now, it turns out that there really was a bug that was happening in ChatGPT, but it does sort of remind us when we're talking about AI that it really does. It's in a weird place right now because it seems like people fall into 2 camps. Speaking of the politics we were talking about earlier, where people are like, oh, this is life-changing. This is like the future of work. Nothing will ever be the same. And those people are like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. And it's completely useless. And really what it is, it's a tool, right? It's a new and exciting sort of realm of software. And it has some flaws, and those flaws they just come out in funnier ways. It's not like Excel getting a multiplication table wrong, right? It's just sitting there and making up some story. When asked about categorization of a survey, which is why we do ours by hand, by the way, we do it the old fashioned way, lying on the couch, smoking.
Yeah. So when I read this, and I have not caught up with Don Taylor I need to get a call with him because we've seen all the stories about, I asked ChatGPT to do a picture of me. Like I asked it to do a picture of me because I'm a widow and I've got a grandkid. I end up being like an 80-year-old woman, right? With 3 hands and one hand out of my head writing or something, right? Like it's always something goofy. Widow. This one was so like, Don, from the conversations and the things I've read, he's really invested in artificial intelligence. He's been leveraging it and using it in a lot of different ways. And it was one of those moments where I think you kind of heard oh, this is the reality of what I'm experiencing. And I think that's really part of, the opportunity for us as a community of HR technologists and as a community of researchers is to go in, leverage this technology, get an understanding of it, obviously be very careful about what you're sharing with it. We're in the process of developing our own AI ethical use strategy here on, just because we know that we have been doing most of our data analysis by hand. We know to keep up with where the market's at, we're going to have to do some analysis in different ways. we want to make sure we're doing that very carefully. And I think Donald's been very open about what's worked and what hasn't in this place, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's on all of us. We all have to be, we can't be on sort of this isn't a political conversation about I'm on this side or that side. This is, we will only make this better and we will only make it more human by interacting in ways that we give feedback, where we give constructive changes, where we notify the world when things aren't working the way they should, because that's how the feedback loop works. So just my 2 cents on it. But I just laughed so hard when Don put this out. I mean, the whole image of Chat GPT, I don't know if any of you watch any of the TikToks put on by this one lady, Elaine, who pretends to be the various social media and artificial intelligence incorporated. Do you know what I'm talking about, Cliff?
Yeah, she also did the one with all the fonts.
Yeah, she did the fonts. She's hysterical. I
put a link to all this.
Put a link to her.
When you look at where this is posted on, we've been doing this lately. Look in the replies. I'll be one of the first replies, and I'll have links to all of this because it's too hard to get it into the description.
It is. But it is this whole idea that these things are going to have nuances that we've got to be comfortable with and understand. And the biggest role any of us should be really thinking about and how we're developing ourselves and our skills is judgment of the data, judgment of the information that's put in front of us, understanding where the data is coming from, understanding the facts, and being willing to go and dig them out. That's the piece that I think we should all be sort of looking at. So I'm sorry, Cliff, I went off on a little bit of tangent there.
No, that's a good way to wrap it up.
Yeah. It's been a busy week. Like I said, I mean, there's a lot going on. I think we're going to see a lot more coming down the pike. But as you said, this is sort of we've wrapped up sort of all the juicy tidbits from this week, but there will be more coming next week, I promise you, because we've got a lot of stuff going on. Just kind of as we wrap today, a couple of big pushes. A reminder that we are getting ready to launch this year's annual HR Systems Survey. You might start to see some announcements coming out, but it will definitely go live in May 1st. So if you are a distributor of an association, a media outlet, an organization who's got a lot of organizations, and you would like to get a sense of sort of what your customers or prospects or people are sort of saying at an aggregate level, contact us. We have a big open campaign right now for our survey distributors. So please let us know if you're interested in distributing the survey and getting a broader view of what your audience is thinking or doing in the HR tech space. For the practitioners, guys, I'm going to put a post out about this week. If you have something to say, if you have something you want us to ask about, if there's a question that's been burning on your mind about what's happening in the HR tech space, let us know. We are in the last 2 weeks of making changes to the survey for this year. We've already added, we've added some social media stuff, Cliff. We've added some questions about artificial intelligence and how organizations are using it, right? We just added, I think, some really good conversations today about learning and development and what applications and what delivery mechanisms people are using in the learning and development space. And we have some really new stuff in sort of the space around what's happening with the talent acquisition area as well. So lots of places where we've got new questions this year, right?
Yeah, we're just digging deeper. We're taking everything you have responded, you as the survey takers have responded and going, okay, now what? Like, okay, that's what you're using it for, but where have you found success with it? Or, okay, you're using it, what are you using it for? Whatever the case may be, just trying to find out that next logical step and dig a little deeper and keep going. And especially like, as Stacey said, any new technologies or new things. And as always, I know I bring it out each time, but if there's anything you're curious about, if you didn't see it in the white paper or you're not sure if it was in there, I realize it's kind of long, and you're like, no, just write to us. You can just use the generic research at sapientinsights.com or either of our names at sapientinsights.com, and we'll have a dialogue and we'll figure it out. It's not just, we want to hear from anyone and everyone and find out what's most important to you.
Yeah, because we're excited. So if you do need to take a look at last year's paper, it is available in our research marketplace with over 200 HR vendors covered. Actually, I went in and did a little counting up. It's more than 200, but I think that's the number that we got last year. Over 5,000 HR practitioners participated last year. So we got all your insights in there. Also, go to our website to sign up for our newsletter to get ongoing updates on research launches and where we'll be speaking and visiting and when you can participate in the survey this year. Be sure to listen to our sister HR Huddle podcast, HR We Have a Problem, hosted by our CEO, Terry Zipper. There's some really exciting upcoming interviews. And if you really like these HR Huddle podcasts, Support us by subscribing and leaving a rating and reviewing where you grab your podcast. Really important to us. To stay up to date with immediate breaking HR tech news and to get all the behind the scenes content, you can follow us at Sapient Insights on LinkedIn, X, and previously known as Twitter and Instagram if they are up and running. Cliff, thanks again for all your support and helping us bring all the conversations and the stories to the show this week, as well as thanks to our production team, Brand Method Media Group, who helps us produce our podcast run by amazing founder Kelly. She's just started her own podcast as well. So go take a look at what she's doing. It's a really great commentary on marketing. Our marketing team, Lisa Renko and Summer Elena, who really make sure that this gets out to you and that we get it done in a timely manner. And most importantly, thanks to our listeners in our community. We couldn't do this without you. That's it for this episode of Spill the Tea on HR Tech. We hope it's been just the brew you needed to start your engines running this week. We'll be back in just 2 weeks with another pot of boiling hot HR Tech updates and insights. Thanks, everyone.